Victory for women, my friends. The Supreme Court has ruled 5-4 against the Biden administration's alteration of Title IX. The changes that they were trying to make was set to redefine sex to include gender identity, which, by the way, is grossly absurd. And this would have effectively allowed transgender women to participate in women's sports. The court's decision effectively blocked the implementation of these new regulations in 26 states and at some schools in every other state. This ruling came after the administration sought an emergency request to enforce part of the rules that were not specifically challenged in ongoing lawsuits. Now, I'll be honest here. This topic never ceases to amaze me in how we just keep propping up the delusion that we can change our biological sex. It is not possible. Ever since the left won the battle over gay marriage, the attention had shifted to the transgender issue. They wanted a new frontier, and they aligned themselves behind this cause. But unlike sexual preferences, this process, especially the post-op transgenders, involves horrific body mutilation. And considering the ever-increasing push to transition children or minors who, according to law, do not even have the capacity to consent, well, then this has become a major issue that has rippled across all free societies. And because it's going after children, I believe the backlash is well underway now. I think this is a losing proposition for anyone who's getting behind the transgender fight right now. I don't see how this delusion continues. Anyway, Fox News posted on this late breaking news today, so we're going to go to them for this story. And they write, Supreme Court strikes down Biden-Harris Title IX change that some would argue would allow men in women's sports. But the Biden administration claimed that the rule wouldn't permit biological men to compete in women's sports. But many experts agreed. Basically, anyone with a brain knew that that was ridiculous. Anyway, the Supreme Court voted 5-4, writes Fox, Friday to reject the Biden administration's emergency request to enforce portions of a new rule that includes protections from discrimination for transgender students under Title IX. The request would have permitted biological men in women's bathrooms, locker rooms, and dorms in 10 states, where there are state-level and local-level rules in place to prevent it. The sweeping rule was issued back in April and clarified that Title IX's ban on sex discrimination in schools covers discrimination based on gender identity, sexual orientation, and pregnancy or related conditions. The rule took effect August 1st, and for the first time, the law stated that discrimination based on sex includes conduct related to a person's gender identity, which, again, is just patently absurd. It's insane. The fact that we as a culture have reached the point where basic biology is rejected by a major political party, it's unbelievable. This is the party, by the way, the Democrat Party that used to pride themselves on being the party of science. If you remember the battle over climate change, global warming, global cooling, what have you, they always argued that the computer models which were predicting global warming were set science, and anyone who dared challenge them were anti-science, and that you had to believe in science. And yet, here we are, an entire political party actually pushing the delusion of anti-science, all in the name of promoting transgenderism. This is amazing to me. Anyway, the article goes on to write, more than 24 Republican attorney generals sued over the rule and argued it would conflict with some of their state laws that block transgender students from participating in women's sports. The Biden administration insisted that the regulation does not address athletic eligibility. What? However, multiple experts presented evidence to Fox News Digital in June that Biden's claims it would not result in biological men participating in women's sports weren't true, obviously, and that the proposal would ultimately put more biological men in women's sports, which absolutely it would do. The court's decision Friday struck a blow to the Biden administration's ongoing efforts to protect transgender inclusion. On this limited record and in its emergency applications, the government has not provided this court a sufficient basis to disturb the lower court's interim conclusions that the three provisions found likely to be unlawful are intertwined with and affect other provisions of the rule, the court's unsigned order states. Now, conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch dissented, agreeing with the three liberal justices and the Biden administration that the lower court rulings were overbroad. Outkick host Riley Gaines spoke in favor of the ruling on her Gaines for Girls podcast, saying, "Not all Supreme Court justices know what a woman is, but today enough did, and that's a win worth celebrating. This is a win for women, free speech, the rule of law, and common sense onward." I mean, if we're being honest here, yes, it's a victory, but the fact that millions of Americans still subscribe to the delusion that we cannot define what a woman is extremely alarming. This may be a victory, but it also reveals how deep of a sickness that our country is under. And by the way, can I ask the question, where in the world are the feminists here? The blatant erasure of women is right in front of all of our faces, and yet most feminists are saying and doing nothing to defend the rights of women. We're watching the erasure of women happen in real time. Where are they? Anyway, the Fox News article goes on to write that earlier this week, a group of 102 female athletes and 26 states petitioned the Supreme Court to take up a challenge over state laws that ban transgender women from competing against biological female athletes, according to a filing obtained by the Washington Times. The petitioners argued that the physical fitness tests demonstrate that there is a difference between men and women at every age. A growing number of women and girls have been facing the humiliating and damaging experience of being forced to compete against males who identify as transgender in the women's sports category. It is hard to express the pain, humiliation, frustration, and shame women experience when they are forced to compete against males in sport. It is public shaming and suffering and exclusion from women's own categories. For damn sure it is. Anyway, Fox goes on to write that ESPN analyst Kirk Herbstreit explained Tuesday in an interview on Outkick's Don't At Me with Dan Dakich that he, of course, didn't believe men belonged in women's sports. "I'm done giving any at all about any of it. It's almost like there are two different sets of rules. And if you have a view that's a little more traditional, or I'm a Christian guy, it's like there's a different set of rules for that viewpoint. It's hard to just turn the other cheek time after time after time." So it is a red letter day, my friends, for the fight against transgenderism in female sports. Where this goes from here, well, I still think it's too early to call, but the tide does seem to be turning. More and more and more, we are seeing the rejection of this strange affliction that the Western society has brought upon themselves. So it'll be fascinating to see where this goes from here. From the To Be Frank show, I am Adrian. Thanks for watching, my friends. I'll see you all in the next video.